All right, welcome everyone to AV Geeks at the Hunt Library, not at the Hunt Library, virtually today on Zoom. I'm Virginia Ferris from the Special Collections Research Center um, at NC State Universities. And this is our 14th semester of this series, partnering NCSU folks with Raleigh's AV Geeks to discuss vintage educational and classroom films. Skip Elsheimer is the founder of AV Geeks and is also an NC State alum. He has been for the last few decades collecting films made throughout the last century, mostly 16 millimeter educational training and other sorts of how-to movies. And he does an incredible job sharing them around the world. He currently houses over 36,000 such films at the AV Geeks archive here in Raleigh and shares them as stock footage for films and exhibits, as research material, and during public events such as this. Today's theme is bicycles and capitalism, and we're thrilled to have our guest, Ross Bassett. Dr. Bassett is a professor of history at NC State and the director of the Benjamin Franklin Scholars Program, a dual degree program between CHAS and the College of Engineering at NC State, which allows engineering students to simultaneously pursue a degree in both the humanities or social sciences along with their engineering studies. He has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in history from Princeton University. He's written books on the history of digital electronics and Indian engineers who studied at MIT. He's also an avid biker who rode from Cumberland, Maryland to Dayton, Ohio this summer and hopes to develop a course on biking at NC State. And in special collections, I've had the pleasure to work with Dr. Bassett on a number of courses that he's taught, including the history of capitalism this semester and others, and a course on the automobile and mobility in the US several years ago, where he shared his interest in cycling. So we're thrilled to have him with us today to discuss several films on bicycles and capitalism. And just a reminder that over 200 of AV Geeks compilations are available for checkout from the libraries. And you can also visit avgeeks.com or search for AV Geeks in YouTube or at archive.org. So I'll hand things over to Skip to kick us off.
All right, thank you so much, Virginia. And let me add Ross to the spotlight and remove, this is what we do nowadays. Thanks Ross for joining us, and thanks for coming up with the theme. Although I'm sure that you didn't know that the options you gave were going to intersect in such a weird way.
No, yeah. And thanks for finding these films, Skip. I think that they were really great. I enjoyed them, and I think they'll be great films for our audience.
Nice. All right, so we're going to start off with, let's see, The New Bicycle. And so these are films that were made for kids in the 70s. And they, as I was talking to you before we got started, you know, we talk about what are models of capitalism that we talk about in the United States. And I always feel like, you know, talking about Ford, talking about GM, talking about auto manufacturers is always the way that they talk about, like, this is the model of capitalism in the United States, how it worked. But I figured that because these were for kids, they scaled it down to something that kids could grasp, which is bicycles. Kids, you know, it deals with transportation, but also the idea that kids want bicycles. They save up for bicycles. They get bicycles as gifts. You know, and so instead of Ford and GM, it's Schwinn that's kind of teaching us these things. So this first film was made in 1973, and it was called The New Bicycle. And it kind of, we follow our hero, and he finds out about how bicycles are made, but also how they're distributed, and kind of asks some interesting questions about where they come from and why certain people don't make them. So it's kind of an interesting way to kind of talk about you know, capitalism, but also, you know, about bikes and how they're made. So here is The New Bicycle.
know what? My dad works in a steel mill where they make steel for life.
Hi, Wayne. How you doing? Hi, Jim. Hey, watch the wrist at it. It's a little off. Okay. See you tomorrow. I didn't do it. What's the matter? Did you get fired, or did you get a raise? Why not this week, Bert? For now? Checking my overtime. I'm gonna buy Dennis a bicycle for his birthday. I'll see you around. Here on, Bert. Take care.
Those rims are double-walled coil steel.
That's heavy gauge, all right. I bet it came from our factory.
Sounds like you know your business. Yeah. Your son will enjoy this bike for years.
How come it's so expensive?
It's fair traded. You couldn't get this cheaper anywhere. I'll tell you what. I'll throw in a horn and a light. It's a present for the boy's birthday.
Well, what do you say? Okay, we'll take it. I'll give you a deposit. He wants an orange one. His birthday is 3 weeks away. Now, if we order it today, can we have it in time?
No problem. The factory processes their orders
Hi, Dennis. Afternoon, Miss McLeod, collecting.
Let's see. 75 cents, right?
Right.
Hey, where's that new bike you told me about?
The store didn't have the right color, but they've ordered it for me.
When I was your age, ordering from the factory meant a long, long wait.
Nowadays, factories can just about make anything in no time at all. My dad said there are at least 100 different steps just to make my bike. Do you know that the things they need for my bike come from all over the country? Many parts are imported from other countries, too. People from all over the world are helping to make my bike.
Hi, Dennis.
That's neat. When it comes to making things, you can do anything. Want to bet you can sell everything you make?
Well, I might be able to sell some of the things I make, but I couldn't compete with those big factories that could make it faster and better. Hand me a dauber, will you? That's just a hobby with me. I like to make things for the house.
Indians made things their family needed too, and traded for what they couldn't make, right?
That's right.
Maybe Mr. Benish could use a bookcase and you could trade this for my new bike.
Maybe. It's not a very practical way of doing business. Besides, I don't want to make another bookcase, and Mr. Benish wants money. He can buy the furniture he needs.
Dad, if you had the time, could you make me a bike?
Absolutely not. It's too complicated. Besides, I don't have to. My job pays enough to buy us everything we need. Hi, Rich.
How you doing, Richie? Hey, Will!
Thank you. Give me the sample.
Hey, you going to get that bike in time for your birthday? Sure, it was shipped already, I bet you. It'll be at the store any day now. You wouldn't be interested in trading your old bike for a great wagon? I sure could use a wagon. Would it be all right?
Why not?
Fine, when I get my new bike, we'll swap even Steven.
Mr. Roberts, please. Mr. Roberts? Mr. Benish at the bike store. Your son's bike came in today. Fine. It'll be ready. See you then. Goodbye. Just in time for your birthday. Henry, the orange bicycle. Bring the bike back in 30 days for a free service check.
Thank you, Mr. Benish.
It's a fine birthday present. Drive carefully. Take care of it.
Let's go. Happy birthday, son.
Thanks, Dad.
So, really fascinating. So Ross, what resonated with you about that film?
Yeah, well, an awful lot. Let me just tell you that I'm someone who grew up in the 60s and 70s. And so as a boy, I had a newspaper route and I bought I was given a 10-speed bike as a gift. So I can identify with Dennis and his joy at getting that new bike. One other thing, I guess one kind of big thing about both of these films that I resonated with me as a historian, that as we generally in America, we parse our history by decades, you could say, the 50s being sort of family centered, the 60s the student rebellions, and Tom Wolfe called the 70s the me generation. The French have this periodization that they have this idea, they call it the Trente Glorieuses, the 30 great years after 1945. And so between 1945 and 1975, there's an emphasis on how great the economy was and economic growth. And I think what I see in this film is sort of the very sort of high point of that idea of economic growth. And you could say the New Deal order, where we had factories producing things in the United States. Factory workers could get good pay, and factory workers could be members of the middle class. One other thing, Skip, when you mentioned this analogy to the automobile industry, one of the things that I thought of myself. So at the beginning, we see that Dennis has this Stingray model bicycle. It's a banana seat bike with high handlebars, and it's a perfectly good bike, but now he wants a 10-speed bike. And so the analogy you could say is that Alfred Sloan of General Motors introduced the idea of planned obsolescence, introduced continual new model changes to make customers continually discontent with what they had and always wanting something new. And so Dennis is sort of learning to be that customer by, even though his bike seems perfectly fine, the terrain seems flat as far as I can tell, but maybe he's gotten a little bit more money now that he has a paper route. And so he wants this new bike. And so he goes and he seems to, want the high price model. So that was one thing that, again, really struck me based on your point about the analogy with the car industry.
And it could be a prestige as well.
Yeah.
His friends all have 10 speeds.
Exactly.
He's got to keep up with the Joneses.
Exactly. So he's learning to be, the perfect consumer for America, that he'll always want to, buy more, that he won't be satisfied. He'll be ready to get rid of his bike, even though it's perfectly serviceable. One other thing, I guess, that was interesting to me was the father and his job. And from what I could tell, I think that I believe that this story was set in California. And I think that the father worked at Kaiser Steel, had a plant, and it was called Fontana. And Kaiser was known for having extraordinarily good relations between labor and management. They had a sharing plan where the idea that labor would somehow be able to share the fruits of the profits that the company had made. There's a brief snippet when the father is walking out where there's a sign that says there's a union management productivity committee. So the idea that again, workers, union and management are working together. And you could say that this is sort of the epitome of the New Deal order, where again, you can be a blue collar worker as he is, but really have a good, solid middle class life and be able to buy really nice things for your family. One other thing though, as he was leaving the factory, one of the things that sort of hinted at problems to come, there was a sign, "Buy American Steel." And that sort of was a hint that there is foreign competition out there, that while American steel companies are doing well, there is this competition, and there is this threat which would really come to the fore in the late 1970s and the 1980s. Just another point that was interesting to me. So when the father comes to the store with his son, the father asks, why does this bike cost so much? And the owner says, these bikes are fair traded. And this is a reference to fair trade laws by which the manufacturer could require all its distributors to sell a product for the same price. And so there's no negotiations possible, and there's no sort of shopping around. He's not looking somewhere else to see if he can get a better deal. That's all there is. And so, the bike manufacturer, the bike dealer throws in a horn and a light, but he doesn't cut the price at all. And the father doesn't expect that. And so that actually ended. Congress outlawed that sort of fair trade practice in 1975. So at that point, it is possible now to have competition. It is possible to shop around. And this idea of fair trade was seen as a way of protecting small businesses, to protect them from larger companies, which could be more predatory in pricing. And so on the one hand, customers after the end of this fair trading might get a better deal. On the other hand, these small businesses are now at risk.
That Apple is able to enforce a suggested retail price and consistent across all of their vendors.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to it seems like some of those rules that were put in place are slowly kind of rolling back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the other thing is how different is it buying a bike nowadays? Like when you bought your most recent bike, how did you buy it?
Yeah, so there's a bike dealer on Hillsborough Street. It's called Cycle Logic. I don't know if any of you know of it. This shop has been in business since the 1970s. The owner is a NC State graduate in aeronautical engineering. And I guess in that way, I'm a bit old school, because I have this relationship with them that I go to them all the time to do all my work, and I know them by name. And I don't really think about the price so much. I don't think, could I get it somewhere else? And one of the issues they've actually had is that they used to be a dealer for Raleigh bicycles, and Raleigh began selling through Amazon. And I guess that just sort of destroyed their their business through Raleigh because everyone could get it cheaper at Amazon. And so they went to a different bike manufacturer, Cannondale. But so there is that tension. I think bikes are complicated enough that you want to have a little bit of hand holding and a little bit of service available to you, that you're not, it's not something that you can just completely have Amazon throw at your doorstep and be completely happy that it's all going to work out. And so there is still this need for a bicycle dealer today. One other sort of thing that was a bit amusing to me, it said the bike shop had a sign, sale on imported bikes, and today, all bikes would be imported, you could say. So that it's not really a category so much. I mean, there are some manufacturers, maybe Trek, who make their bikes in the United States, but many of the components come from overseas today.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's what I like about watching these films is that, okay, they have an intended message that they're trying to get across, but you get to see with hindsight what is different. Like how is the retail experience different? How is the manufacturing process different?
Yeah.
Ordering something and saying that, oh, well, computers, we do it with computers, and so you'll get it in so many weeks or months or whatever. That is interesting to see how that has changed, and what's very much the same as far as, and this is why I like collecting these films and showing them, is because we get that sense of how things have changed over a period of time, and the impact of all of that.
Yeah. One other aspect of things that have changed is as it showed us the distribution system. One aspect, today we're used to containers and container ships carrying things that hadn't really developed so much. And you see what was called the piggyback system, where tractor trailers were put in their entirety on the flat car of a train and shipped across the country. So that was sort of a precursor of the container system. And then it seemed like the distribution system involved several stops, that it went from the factory maybe to a distributor, and then from the distributor to the actual bike dealer.
Yeah. And, here now talking about supply chain is something that is really wasn't talked about a lot 5 years ago. And suddenly now it's talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess people are learning how reliant all aspects of manufacturing and all aspects of retail are on all of this. Any ideas or observations about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they made that a focus, the supply chain, and it's something that we really tend to ignore, except now when it's not working so smoothly, and we see things that are not available at the store. But it's interesting that the filmmakers, the educators, thought that it was important to for the school students to understand what the supply chain was and how it worked at that time. But again, it's something that to most of us at most times is largely forgotten.
Right. So this next film that we have was made in 1971. It's black and white. It was originally color, but the colors faded, and I couldn't get them back, so I just made it black and white. But it's peak 70s. I was saying that we've decided that 1972 is the best year for educational films, so this was just the year before. And this is made by Coronet, which is a big educational film company that was based in Chicago. And this is introducing kids to the concept of different types of jobs. So there's another film that's called People Who Work in Offices. And this one is People Who Work in Factories. And we're going to see different types of factories, but we're going to concentrate on a bicycle manufacturing factory. So, and I apologize for the audio not being on the first part of there is a bunch of annoying things with Zoom, and I was able to mess it up. So I've got it good now. So all right, here we go. Here's people who work in factories.
Dairy where they make ice cream. Just about everything we use is made in some kind of factory. You've probably seen many kinds of They do indeed.
Things like planes and shoes and television sets. All kinds of things.
Yes. Did you know that they also make things like cloth and clothing?
In a factory?
Right. Foods are prepared in a factory too. A bakery is a sort of factory. And so is a dairy where they make ice cream. Just about everything we use is made in some kind of factory. You've probably seen many kinds of factories in different places. Each makes a different kind of goods.
What's it like being a factory worker?
Well, suppose we follow the people going into this factory and see.
What are they doing?
Punching in on a time clock. It makes a record of the hours they work.
Like when our teacher takes attendance.
Something like that.
Do many people work here?
Over 100.
What do they make here?
Well, let's watch and see. Factory workers begin, usually, with some sort of material, like this strip of steel, that they can shape into what they're making. Large machines are used by workers to change the shape of materials.
Pipe. It's a pipe factory.
No, pipe is just the beginning. Watch what these workers do with the pipe.
They're bending it.
Yes? Can you tell what they're bending it into?
I'm not sure.
Maybe you'll be able to tell later, after we've seen other parts workers make in this factory. This worker is cutting parts out of sheet metal with a very powerful machine. Wires attached to the man's gloves stop the machine from coming down when his hands are in the way.
So he doesn't get hurt.
That's right. Safety is very important in a factory. Can you tell what part he's making?
They look like wheels. Does everyone in the factory work at a machine?
Well, they don't all work at running machines. Some get machines ready so that others can use them. All factory work isn't done by machine, though. Many jobs can be done better. Many women work in factories. This woman is fitting spokes into the hubs of wheels. This woman attaches the spokes to the rims of wheels. Each worker does a different part of the job. It's called division of labor. The more they do, the more they get paid.
Hey, are those bike wheels?
They sure look like bike wheels, don't they?
They sure do, except they don't have any tires on them. What's he doing?
He's adjusting the spokes so the wheels run true. It takes a lot of skill.
What are all those sparks from?
Welding.
What's welding?
Well, welding is a way of joining pieces of metal together. Lots of things made in factories look like they're all one piece, but they're really made of separate pieces joined together with a welding machine. The machine makes the metal hot, so hot the metal melts. This welds the pieces into one part.
Are we going to see all the parts put together?
Yes, but now it's lunchtime.
Where are we now?
We're still in the factory. Many factories have places to eat, in the same building where people work. Of course, workers pay for the food themselves.
With money they make working in the factory.
Right. Looks like they're enjoying their lunch, and relaxing too.
Now they have to go back to work.
That's right. Now, all the parts we saw being made earlier are brought to one place. Lots of factory workers have the job of moving things from one part of a factory to another.
These are parts of bicycles, aren't they?
They certainly are.
I knew it. Are they going to put them together now?
They certainly are, on an assembly line. Each worker has a different part to assemble, just as each of the other workers we saw had a different part to make. Each person helps in a different way. Division of labor once again.
So many bikes.
Yes, people and machines producing many things of one kind. Mass production, that's what it's called.
Where are the bikes going now?
For final checking. Most factories have people who check the things when they're finished, to be sure that they're working right before they're sent to the people who buy them.
How do they get to the stores?
Well, first they're put in boxes. Lots of factory workers have the job of packing things. Now they're loaded into trucks and railroad cars to be delivered to cities and towns all over the country. Enough bikes are made in this factory to fill many railroad cars and trucks. This is how the bikes get to stores.
Now the day's over.
Now the day's over.
They can go home now.
Yes, they can go home now.
Or maybe go shopping.
Or maybe go shopping.
Because they have money.
That's because they have money. They do have money. That's what they get for working in a factory.
People like these work in other factories, don't they?
Well, workers in other factories make different things, but their jobs are the same in certain ways.
You mean division of labor?
Yes.
And mass production, assembly lines, things like that.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Hey, Skip.
I have 2 mutes. There's so many opportunities for me to mess up sound today. It's phenomenal. All right. So Ross, what did you think of this film?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was intriguing to watch. So again, I have this personal interest that I had a Schwinn bike that Schwinn, one of their advertisements was that they were seen as the Cadillac of bicycles, which maybe is, appropriate in the idea that it's high end, but also maybe sometimes, the American, somewhat stodgy bicycle that might later on be overtaken by, more by 4-in-1 bikes that were more impressive. A couple of things that stood out to me. So this was a factory. Schwinn had a factory in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm so pretty sure that this was what it was. It was really striking to me, the diversity of the workforce, just young and old, male and female, African American and white. That was really striking for 1971 and maybe typical of, again, that kind of urban factory. I think in some sense we've gone in the sense that we even still have factories. I think a lot of factories have moved out of those sorts of urban environments. I guess these urban environments were often very heavily unionized and very fertile ground for unions. It's also interesting that unions are never mentioned in either of these videos, that they don't talk about it, but unions were part of these factories.
So we have some questions that people have been asking. Did you have any other observations you wanted to make about the film before we delve into some of the questions?
Well, Let's take the questions. That's fine.
Okay. The first one is, can you comment on the more they do, the more they get paid tradition, and how it relates to a situation at a place like an Amazon warehouse today?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Yeah, and the narrator sort of implied, yeah, the more they do, the more they get paid. So that piecework was very common in the late 1800s and the early 20th century, that you would be paid based on the number of units of some sort of commodity that you would make. One aspect of the assembly line was that it kind of obviated that that piece rate, because how much you produced was determined by the speed of the assembly line itself, and not necessarily you were forced to keep up with this assembly line. So Henry Ford, for example, famously offered his workers $5 a day. Again, it wasn't based on how much. The idea was if they were working and that they had to keep up with the assembly line. So like Amazon, I can't say that I know in great detail about Amazon, but I mean, as I understand it, they have an hourly rate, but also monitor people's individual productivity. So you could see maybe in some sense return to that. And I guess the ability to have much greater surveillance of your workforce, Amazon would have in individuals' productivity.
Interesting. And I remember that I think Food Lion got in trouble at some point by dictating to their workers, saying that, well, if you're going to clean all the floors in our store, it takes an hour, and if it takes you more than an hour to do it, you have to clock out and finish it.
Yeah, I think I recall Walmart doing things like that as well. Yeah.
We have another question. This is maybe for the bicycle side of you. It's great that we can have questions coming from both sides. You mentioned that Trek manufactured bicycles in the United States, but they used parts from other places. Do you know of any manufacturer that makes everything in the United States?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know like the very highest of high end, but I think, especially a number of the components, the brakes and the derailleurs are, the Japanese firms Shimano have almost a monopoly of that. I don't know, like I don't follow or have much insight into the racing bikes, but I would believe that they would also use foreign components. So I don't think that there be such a thing as a completely 100% made bike in the United States.
It seems like there is this kind of emergence of this new tech boutique type of thing, where different niche things are like all handcrafted, but also 3D printed, and they have their own little foundries and all that stuff. Yeah. Like it seems like there's this, and of course the bikes, or whatever they're making would be super expensive because it's all artisan.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you can get bikes that way where the frame and a lot of the components are made in the United States. I think where mass production still sort of holds sway is in the derailleur, the mechanism that shifts gears, and the braking, and so that's been resistant to artisanal sort of efforts, I guess.
And here's a question that maybe you'll know, I'm not sure. Somebody asked, are apprenticeships still used in heavy manufacturing jobs? Or is there like an apprentice? And even like with the unions, I think unions had something where they would have apprentices and then they would ascend.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. The one thing I will say is, I think, for example, in Germany, that's still a fairly common ladder that you can go through apprenticeship. And I think I know I follow things in France, and so in France there's been some discussion about whether this German model is something that should be followed. I don't think as far as I know, and I mean, it could be, maybe in specific skilled areas like, maybe carpentering or something like that. It could be, but I'm not exactly sure of that.
Interesting. Any other observations or things in looking at both of the films as far as, how it sits in what you teach and what you like to talk about?
It was interesting to me, the cafeteria, it seemed like, as I understand it, this factory was also the headquarters of Schwinn. And so there were executives there in the cafeteria that it seemed, the executives were eating in the same, cafeteria as the workers. So that was interesting. So this was maybe, again, the high point of manufacturing in America, that just a little bit more on Schwinn, that I believe in 1980, workers joined a United Auto Workers Union, and there was a 13-week strike at this factory. And then ultimately, Schwinn closed it down and moved production to Mississippi, and then ultimately moved it overseas. And so, again, this is a story of a particular moment in time when both of these are films or stories at a particular moment in time when Americans still made a lot of things, and they weren't, made overseas. And even, basic things could be made in the United States, and we could pay workers good wages to do that.
And so when they moved to Mississippi, was it because that was a right to work state where they didn't have to deal with unions?
Yeah, I think that exactly, and they could pay less, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the other aspect of this, I think Schwinn kind of famously made an agreement with a Chinese company, and they basically they had them make their bicycles for them. But then this company began making bicycles on their own, and sort of Schwinn went bankrupt in 1992, and has kind of been remade in several incarnations, but is not, a force in bicycles anymore.
Interesting. I guess there's another one to look at as far as like Harley Davidson, the motorcycle. Like here's an American brand that then was sold to like AMF, and then AMF, they just kind of spoiled the brand, and then it came back and is now this big force to reckon with. As far as I don't know where they're manufactured, if they're manufactured in the United States, but it seemed like, here's this brand that just will never go away, and it went away, and then it came back gangbusters.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Yeah, I think there may you always should be ready for surprises, I guess. Things that are branded as American, whether can end up being made overseas. So I believe they're made in the United States, but I'm open to be surprised.
Interesting. Well, thank you for joining us. This was really great. And like I said, I love it when things overlap, where it's like you throw a couple of ideas to me and I'm like, oh, I think I got something for you.
Yeah. Again, thanks, Skip, for finding these films. It was great. It was a great treat to be able to watch them, and thanks for resurrecting them.
Yeah, maybe we'll do this again next year.
Yeah,
I'll have you pick 2 other subjects and we'll see if we have an overlap.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
Well, I'll jump in and just say thank you so much, Dr. Bassett. This was really wonderful, and thank you, Skip. And everyone watching, just remember to visit avgeeks.com for more information, and check out compilations from AV Geeks when the library's physical collections, when you can come check them out from the libraries. Our next show will be on January 28th next year, 2022 at 3 p.m. again, featuring me with a combination of films from the Special Collections Research Center at NC State, as well as from Skip's AV Geeks collection, on a mystery topic to be announced in the coming weeks.
It's because you have so much material, so much great material.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from, so it'll be great, whatever it is. So January 28th at 3 p.m., tune in then. And until then, you can watch previous AV Geeks at the library shows through the library's website. So thanks again, Skip and Dr. Bassett, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks again, Skip.
Yeah, thank you.